Hello, this is Nick Holland with Information Security Media Group. Welcome to today's webinar titled The State of Application Security, Developing a Holistic View for Today's Perimeter-Free Organization. Presented by Nick Holland of ISMG, that's myself, and Matt Keil of Cequence. A little about today's webinar. If you're part of an organization that has lost visibility into your public-facing applications, you are not alone. In just released research, at least 33% of the respondents said they have too many applications to count. There's a 50% chance you work at an organization that is understaffed in security. You're almost definitely one of the 93% of businesses that say they connect to customers, partners, and suppliers via the web, mobile, or API-based applications. And we're still wondering how that's not even higher. No matter the internal challenges or resource constraints you are dealing with, we're all here to cope with growing application security vulnerabilities and attacks. During the webinar, you'll learn why, despite growth in mobile apps, which rely heavily on APIs, the web still bears the brunt of cyber attacks, the time and cost required for effective application security, the most important features required in a security solution, and how to deal with growing automated attacks against apps and APIs. Before we begin, let me tell you a bit about Information Security Media Group. We're a global education and intelligence firm, and we currently publish more than 24 international media sites. Bank Info Security and CU Info Security for financial services, Gov Info Security for the public sector, and Healthcare Info Security for the medical community. And then Info Risk Today about information risk management, Data Breach Today about breach prevention and response, and Careers Info Security. Each of these sites is dedicated to providing education and news regarding information security, but specifically tailored to their vertical sectors. With over 850,000 members registered to our websites, we've created a true information source tackling the key issues of interest to our unique audience. If you have questions for our speakers during the course of this session, please submit them via the chat window on your screen. And if anyone should experience any technical issues while viewing today's webinar, please dial the number on your screen. Dial extension 115, as we do have technical support staff standing by. In addition, I want to emphasize that the content being presented in today's webinar is copyrighted material and is meant for today's session and individual study purposes only. If you or your institution would like to use the information presented in today's session or are looking for customized training education, please contact us. About Cequence, the sponsor of today's webinar. Cequence Security is a venture-backed cybersecurity software company founded in 2015 and based in Sunnyvale, California. Its mission is to transform application security by consolidating multiple innovative security functions within an open AI-powered software platform that protects customers' web, mobile, and API-based applications and supports today's cloud-native, container-based application architectures. The company is led by industry veterans that previously held leadership positions at Palo Alto Networks and Symantec. Customers include Fortune 500 organizations across multiple vertical markets, and the solution has earned multiple industry accolades, including 2018 Gartner Cool Vendor. Learn more at www.cequence.ai. About today's speakers. First up is Nick Holland, myself, Director of Editorial at ISMG. I'm an experienced security analyst, having spent the last decade focusing on the intersection of digital banking, payments, and security technologies. I've spoken at a variety of conferences and events, including Mobile World Congress, Money 2020, Next Bank, and South by Southwest, and I've been quoted by the Wall Street Journal, CNN Money, MSNBC, NPR, Forbes, Fortune, Business Week, and Time Magazine, The Economist, and the Financial Times, among others. I hold an MSc degree in Information Systems Management from the University of Stirling in Scotland. I'm going to be joined today by Matt Keil, who is Director of Product Marketing at Cequence. Matt Keil joined Cequence Security in April of 2019 as a member of the product marketing team, driving product-related messages and outbound content creation. Prior to joining Cequence Security, Mr. Keil worked at Palo Alto Networks for 12 years, where he was part of the team that launched the company, and his most current role was Director of Product Marketing for Public Cloud. Cumulatively, Mr. Keil has 19 years of experience in the enterprise network security market, working for Checkpoint Software, NetScreen/Juniper Networks, then Palo Alto Networks, and now obviously Cequence Security. On to today's agenda. We'll go through three sections here. The first is going to be the methodology for the research. Second, and the longer part of this presentation, will be the survey findings. And finally, there'll be conclusions and recommendations. So moving on to the methodology. This survey was conducted online between October and December of 2019. It generated over 100 responses from organizations in 16 business sectors, primarily in the US. And on to the survey findings. So here's the meat of the discussion. What I'm going to go through now are a number of the questions that were asked in the survey and some of the key findings from that. You'll find a lot of these results are also published in the report that goes alongside this particular presentation, and that's available through Cequence Security. The first question here was, how many public-facing web, mobile, or API-based applications have you deployed across your organization? Some 36% of survey respondents said their organization has less than 50 applications deployed across web, mobile, or API channels. Another 35% have between 51 and 250 deployed, but nearly 30% of respondents stated they have too many public-facing applications deployed across their organization to count, or they simply don't know how many apps they've deployed. Moving on to the next slide. Complementing the previous question, we asked, how confident are you that you know exactly how many of each of the following apps have been deployed across your organization? 1 for no confidence, 10 for highest confidence. Rather paradoxically, many of the survey participants said they're confident in the knowledge of how many apps they had deployed, which didn't seem to concur with the previous question. This was irrespective of whether the apps are web, mobile, or API based, and these were typically on an 8 or more on a scale of 1 to 10, obviously indicating a high degree of confidence. We asked about where the applications are deployed. The majority of survey participants have applications deployed in the cloud. Some 58% of applications are deployed in either a public, private, or hybrid cloud environment, while 43% are deployed on premises. We asked also, what type of applications are you most concerned in terms of being vulnerable to attacks? Despite the prevalence of mobile devices, survey participants stated they're still most concerned about the vulnerability of web apps. Some 60% list this as their top concern, compared to just 25% for mobile apps and 15% for API-based apps. We then moved on to ask them which of the following security products are currently deployed to protect these three types of applications. Web application firewalls are the most commonly used protection for web apps, with 87% of companies using this security product. Nearly 3/4 of companies are using a bot mitigation solution for the protection of web apps as well. Mobile apps are most commonly protected by CDN and bot mitigation solutions, while API-based apps are predictably commonly protected by API security solutions. We moved on to ask, as a whole, how much money do you spend annually on tools, technologies, and services specifically related to these application security tools? The majority of companies spend less than $1 million per year on tools, technologies, and services related to application security. Just 20% spend more than $2 million per year. We then moved on to ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with the effectiveness of the security products you've deployed? Apparently, survey participants aren't that satisfied with the application security products they've put in place so far. The average rating on a 1 to 10 scale was a rather tepid 6.1. Staffing seems to be something of a problem. This is well documented in the industry. This survey results hammers this home as well. Half of the respondents report they are understaffed in terms of skilled application security talent. Drilling down into this a little further, we also asked, what are your plans to hire more application security talent within the next 12 months? The majority of companies are looking to hire 1 or more security staff members in the next 12 months, and nearly a quarter are satisfied with current staffing levels, while worryingly, 13% say they can't find the talent to fill the vacancies. In the next series of questions, we asked about vulnerability exploits and automated attacks. We asked in this one, on average, how long does it take your organization to detect vulnerability exploits on your web, mobile, or API-based applications? About 69% of organizations say they detect vulnerability exploits on the application within 5 days or less on average. On the next slide, we look at the mitigation side of things. We asked, on average, how long does it take your organization to mitigate vulnerability exploits on your web, mobile, or API-based applications? 54% said they mitigate the exploits within 5 days or less. In the next section of slides, we asked again about the attacks happening to web, mobile, or API-based applications. We asked how long does it take for your organization to detect automated attacks. More than half of organizations reported that automated attacks are detected in less than a day. Similarly, again, we asked about mitigation. So we asked, on average, how long does it take your organization to mitigate automated attacks on your web, mobile, or API-based applications? And again, we saw that 29% reported the attacks were mitigated in less than a day. The next question asks, how many total attacks on your web, mobile, or API-based apps has your organization experienced during the last 12 months? Web-based apps are the most frequently attacked, the survey shows. Some 15% of respondents said they had 51 to 100 attacks on the web channel during the last 12 months, compared to 6% for mobile and 9% for API-based. However, a bigger concern is the fact that approximately a third of survey participants do not know how many attacks on their applications have occurred. We asked here about what is the estimated cost to your organization for the organization to detect, mitigate, and recover from all the attacks you experienced during the last 12 months, including staff hours, business disruption, financial losses, and so on. More than 58% of the survey participants spent more than $100,000 to detect, mitigate, and recover from application attacks in the last 12 months. And about 19% are spending $1 million or more. We also asked participants this question. Based on the application security tools and technologies you have in place today, on a 1 to 10 scale, what is your level of satisfaction that you are being protected from automated bot attacks and vulnerability exploits? The average rating for respondents was a less than stellar 6.7. On to our final slide. Assuming you were evaluating a new application security solution, we asked people to rate their interest in each of the features below on a 1 to 5 scale. The most popular feature would be a solution that can improve staff productivity and produce measurable cost savings. But other features that ranked highly included an open architecture that integrates and shares data with other tools in your network, a solution that automatically discovers all applications, an AI ML solution that can automatically detect and defend attacks on application.
Okay, so that is the data from the report. So what can we conclude from that? First thing to bear in mind is that clearly there's an enormous amount of applications at the endpoint at this point in time. So it is, as we would say, the application Wild West. What we have is the move to containers. We have the adoption of more iterative development methodologies, and certainly an increased usage of APIs, which is making it very challenging now for us to know the actual number of applications deployed. And as a result of that, clearly enforcing security controls is difficult. So there's not only more web, mobile, API-based apps being deployed, but they're increasingly distributed across public and private cloud environments. Now, we did this research at the end of last year, clearly, and we are in a very different landscape now. So with obviously the declaration of a pandemic and the move to push people to work remotely, this is even further compounded. What we have now are obviously a multitude of people using devices that are possibly not optimal for the work environment. We've pushed people to work remotely, and they are now using potentially unsanctioned applications. They're downloading their own software. They're using using BYOD, their own devices. So the attack vectors on the application landscape are extremely difficult. So, I mean, I guess to conclude on that point, I mean, effective application security can only really occur when security teams have a clear picture of where and when apps are being used across the network. And you've got a significant amount of work there to be done in terms of capturing the true number of applications being used by an organization. This problem isn't going to go away. We are obviously now considering not just the state of the pandemic work from home environment, but also beyond that, there's almost certainly going to be not a return to work as it was back in the beginning of this year. We are now looking at a far more distributed workforce working remotely, and again, potentially using their own devices. So in short, it is an application Wild West, and that is something that we'll need to get a handle on. Moving on to the second point of the conclusion, the perennial staffing crisis. And this is something that's clearly, it's not a surprise that cybersecurity industry has a significant shortage of jobs, depending on who you speak to. There's a shortfall of somewhere between 1 and 3 million. It could be way higher, but it is certainly, long story short, there is a significant deficit. And this, again, this survey points this out as well. It shows that half of organizations are understaffed when it comes to individuals with AppSec expertise. And then beyond that, it's, you know, yes, you've got majority of respondents planning to hire more staff in the coming year, but then it's that in itself is a problem, because they're saying that on top of that, the qualified candidates are extremely lacking. You just can't get the right people. So given that, it's, you know, would it be more effective, we would say, to accomplish manual tasks with artificial intelligence and machine learning, to use technology to do obviously some of the heavy lifting with the more manual tasks that certainly are causing, again, issues related to burnout of analysts in the industry. And then, you know, obviously another situation you could do is obviously look at alternative staffing areas. There's obviously an abundance of people looking for work right now. I think that potentially there's an opportunity there to be matching people with applicable skills that not necessarily in cybersecurity, but in other industries. And there's been obviously a number of initiatives that have been pushing for that diversity in the workforce. And again, I think that's clearly one area that, again, would help address this perennial staffing crisis. And then moving on to the third bullet point of the conclusion here, one of the things that you know, we've certainly seen from the survey is that, again, the survey respondents, the cybersecurity professionals that we surveyed for this, they're most concerned about the vulnerability of web apps. Which may be kind of having their eye off the ball somewhat. They're missing the fact that, you know, mobile apps or API-based apps are very, very pervasive and growing. I mean, and again, with this, obviously this workforce that is now very much remote and using potentially mobile devices for a lot of business applications. Again, the adoption and usage of mobile in particular could be an area that's underestimated. So they're underestimating clearly things like also the fact that mobile devices rely heavily on APIs. So you've got the fact that, again, attackers can easily deconstruct mobile apps and then target the API being used for the attack. So we'd say that, I mean, again, back to that massive increase in remote traffic stemming from the pandemic, a lot of attackers can more easily also hide in plain sight. So again, there's that perfect storm out there of the remote employee using mobile devices, using BYOD, and certainly, again, the traffic that is hitting those remote devices is potentially a vector for incoming attacks. So moving on to our recommendations. I mean, this is, I think the first one is fairly obvious, which is know your network. And again, this is probably not a simple task. I mean, again, understandably, this is a problem compounded by the remote workforce again. But we'd say that security professionals need to develop a more holistic view of the entire application threat surface for their organization. And that's across all channels, so web, mobile, API, based apps. It's a fundamental first step in being able to triage potential vulnerabilities and where resource allocation is most needed. So obviously you can't protect what you don't know. And with a remote workforce and the potential for employees to circumvent IT sanctioned applications, and this is again a real thing we've seen through the pandemic, it's remote workers are finding ways that are operationally effective for them, but these the apps that they're using may certainly not well be sanctioned by the organization. So it's critical to look at the endpoints and obviously get a holistic view of what's happening there. Moving on to the next point, again, if you're trying to, obviously, you know, you need to acquire a budget for this. Knowing the application landscape is just one part of the overall picture. But what you need to do and to evangelize and to get the organization to buy in is to quantify the cost of an attack. And that's, you know, as we've seen through this, you know, it's understated, we think. It's probably significantly understated because a third of organizations don't actually know how many attacks occur, because it's tough to, you know, obviously quantify the intangible costs of remediation, things like extra staffing, lost productivity, reputational damage, stock devaluation. These are, again, peripheral costs that are hard to quantify. But, you know, if the survey participants are seeing this as, you know, a cost in terms of an attack that's in the low millions at the worst, that's probably a huge understatement. So I think certainly in terms of obviously articulating the gravity of the situation, getting buy-in from senior executives, and for them to pass on from a top down that need to obviously secure applications throughout the entire organization, you need to really have an idea of the gravity of how bad this can be, both from obviously the damage of an actual attack, but then clearly all the sort of ripple effect from that. And then we're moving on again to the final point, which is, again, it's the, you know, the finding the talent gap. It's been a perennial issue with the cybersecurity industry. Obviously, the talent shortage isn't going away. So we say, again, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, you'd need to start looking for alternatives for people maybe from backgrounds outside security. And you know, it's amazing some of the initiatives that are out there already. There's a lot of initiatives that are sort of obviously targeting the diversity to bring more women into the cybersecurity industry. There's a lot of initiatives for people who are, you know, again, they've clearly got the skills and aptitude for analytical work, but maybe haven't, you know, got the requisite acronyms after their name, and they haven't had the potential financial capabilities to do the courses required. But they have the aptitudes there. So certainly finding the right people outside of the traditional channels is going to be very necessary. But then also, there's a lot that can be done with technology as well to make the most of the people that we do have. You know, there's certainly technologies that provide diagnostic information on application security vulnerabilities, and they automate laborious manual tasks that, again, are probably a waste of the skills and talent that these professionals that we have already are using. And we would say as well that, again, I mean, the way the landscape's going, attacks are now at machine speed. We have massive botnets attacking at speeds that, and in patterns that humans really just can't register. We're not designed to do that. So in terms of, again, these machine speed attacks, we need to have a machine speed response for detection and remediation. So certainly we would say, you know, that the best case scenario here is find people from outside, but also utilize the people you have inside to the best of their capabilities, leveraging technologies such as AI and ML that will certainly do some of the heavy lifting and again, provide you know, the best hybrid of computer and human talent. So now on to questions with Matt Keil of Cequence Security. If you have any questions for Matt, please put them in the chat box on the web application.
What are your gut reactions to the report's findings? You know, what stands out from your standpoint?
The things that stood out for me, the one thing that really stood out for me was the statistics, the findings around APIs. And the reason it stood out for me is that I think that the API conversation in the report is somewhat understated. And I think there are a couple of reasons that that might be happening. Number one, people just don't know how many APIs are in use within their environments. This is the first thing that our customers tell us, is that they just don't know how many APIs are out there. And the reasons are several. You know, the move towards decentralized or componentized or modular applications. All of those application modules, whether they are container-based or some other technology, typically will use APIs to communicate. That's the first reason. The second reason is The move to the cloud is also driving a lot of API usage. The adoption of mobile and other types of devices. The mobile phone that you and I use that have all those cool apps, all of those apps typically use APIs to reach back to a back-end server. And then finally, web forms themselves are typically, it's not like the old web forms of the past. The web form that we're using to log in or register for a service is typically now calling back to an API or a series of APIs to send that data along. And so I think that those are just a few of the reasons why I think that the API statistics are somewhat understated. That was my biggest takeaway from reviewing the report this morning.
Okay. So one of the findings was that 30% of organizations that we surveyed stated that they have too many apps to even count. I mean, how do they get a handle on that? It seems like that's a situation that's probably going to escalate over time with, again, IoT and so on.
Fully agree with that assessment. You don't know what you don't know, is what one of our customers had said at my previous company. Visibility, I'm a big fan of the statement, knowledge is power. Understanding what you have there is the first step towards improving your security or improving some other aspect of your IT infrastructure. And so the best thing an organization can do is gain visibility into what applications or APIs are in use, who's using them, who has access to them, and what they are connecting to. That would be a huge step forward in getting a handle on the number of applications and the attack surface area of that organization.
Okay. I'll move on to another question, which is focusing on some of the research we did around where organizations are most concerned about their apps. And at this point, organizations are more concerned about web apps compared to mobile or API apps. Are they missing the point there? Do you think they should be focusing more on these other areas?
I don't know that they're missing the point. I think I would go back to the conversation that I had earlier, is that they might be viewing a web app, that is actually talking to an API. So I think that the web numbers are probably accurate. It's some of the other numbers that are probably a little bit inaccurate, because they may just not understand exactly how the application is structured. And no matter how hard we try to make the question as clear as possible, some may have viewed the question in another, or misinterpreted the question, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, fair enough. And then we looked as well at just again this. I think one of the areas that concerned me is how opaque it is for a lot of organizations. Again, another finding there was that over a third of organizations stated they just don't know the total number of attacks they've experienced on their apps. Did that concern you?
It's a little concerning, but it's also a little bit it's kind of understandable. I think that one of the things we're seeing is just the nature of how applications are deployed now. Some of the trends that I mentioned earlier, the move to the cloud, the decentralization, or the componentization, I should say, of applications, are now allow groups within the organization who aren't necessarily application experts to go out and be deploying applications. So if we look at in the past 6 months, all of the different data breach incidents, many of them are misconfigured storage or databases that were put in the public cloud or put in a publicly accessible environment. So the question that you have to ask is, why are these errors continually occurring? Are the solutions themselves too complex? Do the people who own the people that are deploying it, are they aware of the configuration requirements to lock it down? Are they aware that when you put it in the public cloud, it's exposed to the entire universe of the internet? These are all questions that really haven't been answered. But that's, those are some of the things that are concerning. We don't see we have not seen a slowdown in the nearly weekly announcement of yet another large scale or fairly large scale data loss incident.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to close out here, what 3 recommendations would you make for today's cybersecurity professionals based on the report's findings?
I can actually boil it down to one, and really it's visibility. Get visibility into what's out there, what APIs are in use, what web applications are in use. Understand who has access to it, what it connects to, and then from there begin dialing up the control mechanisms and the protection mechanisms around those applications.
Well, thank you to Matt Keil of Cequence Security. I also want to thank all of our attendees for taking time out of their day to attend this session. I trust that today's discussion provides some valuable insight on the state of application security and developing a holistic view for today's perimeter-free organization. We hope to see you again at one of our upcoming events. And for Information Security Media Group, I'm Nick Holland.